From the decline of a technological pioneer to the fateful decision of an entertainment executive, in this video, we look at the worst company fails. Number 9. Atari. One of the most popular companies of the 1970s, the founders Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney created Computer Space, the first widely available video arcade game. In 1976, they came out with the Atari Video Computer System, known as VCS for short, and it was renamed the 2600 later on. The games available on this console included Asteroids, Pac-Man, and Space Invaders. It came with 2 joysticks, paddles, the console, and Combat game cartridge for $199, which would be about $876 nowadays. Atari was purchased by Warner Communications later that year for around $30 million. In the late 1970s and the beginning of the 1980s, while the company was under Raymond Kassar, they sold millions of computers and 2600s, and it was at its peak. However, in the early 1980s, they began having issues. The organization was split and uncommunicative and couldn't keep up with the evolving gaming industry. The video game crash of 1983 caused them to lose over $500 million. Although Atari rebounded shortly in 1986 under the ownership of Tremiel, despite their release of a few more consoles, it was ultimately sold to Hasbro for just $5 million in 1998. Number 8. Borders. This Ann Arbor, Michigan company was founded in 1971. In 1992, Kmart took hold of Borders, and they were competing with larger chains like Crown Books and Barnes & Noble. In 1997, they built their first international store, located in Singapore, that was 32,000 square feet and was the most sizable bookstore in the country. Soon after, they opened a total of 41 stores in Ireland, Australia, the United Kingdom, and New Zealand. Plus, they purchased 35 more stores in Britain. They also established Borders UK Limited in 1998, which became one of the most prominent booksellers in the nation. By 2003, Borders had nearly 1,250 stores. However, the company made a profit for the last time in 2006. For the 4 years that followed, its annual income dropped by $1 billion. This was most likely due to their failure to implement online technology. The Amazon Kindle was released in 2007, and Barnes & Noble came out with the Nook 2 years after that. Plus, the iPod debuted in 2010, so without the means to compete, Borders fell by the wayside. They released their own version of the e-reader called Kobo. Unfortunately, it didn't catch on like the others, although it's still around. Number 7. IBM. IBM, or International Business Machines, was originally formed in 1911 under the name Computing Tabulating Recording Company, or CTR. However, their breakthrough didn't come until 1964, when they announced the IBM System 360, which gave companies the opportunity to upgrade their systems without rewriting their applications. They came out with the IBM System 370 in 1970. The 370 and 360 combined formed the IBM mainframe, which became the leading computing platform and mainframe computer in the industry at the time. In 1981, they introduced the IBM PC, which quickly took over. But they faced an $8 billion loss in 1993, which was the largest in corporate history at the time. The reason for the near extinction of the company was due to misreading computer industry trends. However, after hiring Louis V. Gerstner Jr., who worked as a top American Express executive, and the former CEO of RJR Nabisco, things began taking a turn for the better. By 1994, they made a $3 billion profit. That year, they also introduced the first speech recognition technology for personal computers. In 1997, their computer called Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov, a world chess champion, in a tournament-style competition. It was the first computer to do so. IBM has only been improving since Gerstner's takeover, making it one of the rare cases where a seemingly doomed company resurfaces. Number 6. Sears. This enormous department store chain started as a mail-order firm in 1882 that focused on selling jewelry and watches. After the Panic of 1893, which caused a recession, the company's creator, Richard Warren Sears, partnered with Aaron Nussbaum and Julius Rosenwald to turn it around. They started selling furniture, clothing, and all types of various goods that their customers wanted by 1903. 3 years later, they opened the Sears Merchandise Building Tower in Chicago, which acted as its headquarters until 1973. The Sears Tower was finished that year and took over as the organization's home base. From 1919 to 1921, the post-World War I recession hurt the business. and Rosenwald gave $21 million of his own money to get Sears back on its feet. By 1922, it was stable again. They started building department stores until the 1950s. They even expanded their company during this time and added Allstate Insurance, Kenmore, Supertone, etc. However, criminal charges filed against Sears in the 1990s resulted in the beginning of its decline. They canceled the general merchandise catalog in 1993. They became a part of Kmart in 2004, creating the Sears Holdings Corporation. But after peaking in 2006, they stopped making a profit by 2010. For the following 7 years, they had to close a significant amount of stores, going from over 3,500 to under 700. Sears couldn't compete with stores like Walmart. In October 2018, they filed bankruptcy. They continue to hold on by mere threads, but Sears is on a continual downhill slope. Number 5. Blockbuster. This video rental service was founded in 1985 by David Cook, who had previously created Cook Data Services in 1978. The first Blockbuster entertainment store opened in Dallas, Texas. It had 8,000 VHS tapes along with 2,000 beta tapes. In 1987, they had 19 stores, and shortly after, they were opening a new one every day. Blockbuster's continued success resulted in the purchase of over 250 Errol's stores in 1990. They went on to buy Super Club Retail Entertainment Corporation, which brought them even more stores. Blockbuster was a multi-billion-dollar organization, but it wasn't long before the business became threatened. New video-on-demand technology, among other things, was introduced to the movie and video game rental industry, and they didn't know how to compete. Viacom bought Blockbuster for over $8 billion in 1994. Then, when DVDs came out in 1998, John Antioco, who was CEO from 1997 to 2007, turned down a rental rights offer from Warner Brothers, which would have allowed them to rent out movies prior to public sale. They tried to keep up with the times, but were ultimately outdone by services like Redbox and Netflix. Considering the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, offered Blockbuster a partnership in 2000 that Antioco turned down, losing to the business was a big hit. Number 4. Circuit City. This business was founded in 1949 as Ward's Company. 10 years later, the owners, Samuel S. Wurtzel and Abraham L. Hecht, were running 4 home appliance and television stores in Richmond, Virginia. In 1984, they officially changed the name to Circuit City. 4 years later, they started implementing a new superstore design for their retail locations. The company was well known for impeccable service. However, as time went on, Circuit City began declining. By 2000, the stores weren't up to date or in profitable areas, and they couldn't compete with companies like Best Buy. So they redesigned their shops, which cost them about $1.5 billion. They also changed their employees from commission to hourly pay and laid people off to save approximately $130 million a year. However, the revamping of their properties was too little, too late. When the company's executives left within a short period between 2006 and 2007, things continued going downhill. They announced that all of their retail locations would close in January 2009, and the last day they were open was March 9th of the same year. Number 3. Kodak. Although this photography company is still around, they missed the opportunity to continue their dominance in the industry. It was founded in 1888 by George Eastman. That same year, they presented the first Kodak camera. In the early 1890s, they introduced their first folding cameras and came out with the Pocket Kodak in 1895. In 1900, Kodak released the Brownie, which opened the doors for mass-market photography. They were responsible for 90% of film and 85% of camera sales in the United States by 1976. Just a year before that, one of Kodak's electrical engineers, Stephen Susson, created a digital camera. However, Kodak executives failed to recognize that consumers would eventually switch to digital, and they didn't launch the new camera. Since other companies like Sony and Apple started selling digital versions, film sales began dropping in 2001. They offered digital cameras that year, but were losing $60 for every one they sold. Although they became the #1 seller in 2005 regarding digital cameras, their decline started shortly after. Plus, the cameras were slowly being replaced by tablets and smartphones. The company's continual decline resulted in them filing for bankruptcy in 2012. Number 2. Nokia. Nokia was founded in 1865 when Fredrik Idestam, a Finnish-Swede mining engineer, created a pulp mill near Tampere, Finland. Another mill was established near Nokia in 1868 and had better hydropower sources. In 1871, Idestam and his friend Leo Michelin formed the Nokia Company. Michelin became the chairman in 1896 after Frederick retired, and he began focusing on electricity generation. In 1922, Nokia partnered with Finnish Rubber Works and a cable factory. The three organizations formed the Nokia Corporation in 1967. They worked in 4 separate industries: electronics, cable, rubber, and forestry. And in the 1970s, they began taking part in radio and networking. Nokia started creating telephone switches and professional mobile radios around this time. When Jorma Ollila became CEO in 1992, he decided to transform Nokia into a telecom-oriented company. It proved successful, and Nokia grew exponentially in the years after. They went from making no profit to $1 billion by 1995 and had made $4 billion by 1999. They began selling camera phones in the US in 2003. Nokia stayed on top for a long time, but their platform became outdated in the early 2010s when Android and iOS came out. Despite their attempt to get things running again by partnering with AT&T, they ultimately sold the mobile and devices division of their company to Microsoft in 2013. Number 1. MySpace. Another huge company failure was MySpace. The social networking site was founded in 2003 by Chris DeWolf, Brad Greenspan, Josh Berman, and Tom Anderson. Their website gained popularity rapidly among young adults and teens. MySpace became the most significant and widely used social media site from 2005 to 2009. Around 2005, Mark Zuckerberg wanted to sell Facebook to DeWolf for around $75 million, but the CEO declined. However, Facebook began taking off, and MySpace started its decline. Other sites were making social networking easier for their users, whereas MySpace became difficult to use. Additional advertising on their website slowed things down as well. In 2011, MySpace was sold to Specific Media for around $35 million.